All right, guys, welcome again to. Sorry for the kind of the long break in between episodes. We just had a very busy summer full of programming and events. But welcome to our podcast. This is the We Are Indigenous podcast. Our guest today is Natalie Fletcher. We're gonna get to know her a little bit more in the episode, but Natalie's actually our new. Well, what's your role here, Natalie, at the school?
I am the assistant manager of the Institute of Indigenous Learning.
And then what does that mean to the people watching or listening? What is it like? What does your role entail?
So basically, I'm in charge of the day-to-day operation of the First Nations Center. So in charge of programming that happens within the center, financial aspect of that as well.
Yeah.
So there's like an administration part of that, but mostly anything that has to do with students coming into the center.
Yeah.
I would like assist students with issues that they might have within the institution, but also in charge of bringing people into the center that can maybe provide counseling and cultural teachings, that sort of thing. So bringing in, like we had a drum making workshop. So those kinds of activities and sort of any kind of requests that students have while they're at Fanshawe, I'd help them with.
And then the question, I guess, is what made you want to come to Fanshawe and be part of the Institute of Indigenous Learning / First Nation Center?
First Nation, yes. It was actually because I've sat on the Indigenous Education Council for probably 10 years here at Fanshawe, and I worked on the Indigenous Action Plan and seeing all the changes that were happening here at Fanshawe, like really encouraging changes and awesome initiatives that are happening.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a part of that. So when the opportunity came up, I applied and here I am.
Okay, awesome. And prior to that, where did you work?
So for 10 years, I worked at Southern First Nation Secretariat. It's a tribal council that's located in Delaware First Nation.
Yeah. So local.
Local,
Yep.
yeah. So I worked in the post-secondary department. I was the manager of the post-secondary department. So we're in charge of post-secondary funding for Indigenous students.
Okay, awesome. And while you were there, who was your favorite student that you ever had?
I think it might have been Anthony Johns.
I
know, Daniel.
Lie.
Daniel Kennedy.
You hear that,
100%.
I got it on wax. No, so yeah, we're starting to make it seem like we this is like kind of our first interaction, but no, Natalie was my post-secondary counselor while I was in school. Prior to her was I'm forgetting his name right now. Marshall, yeah, Marshall George. And then Natalie got on, and my first kind of experience with Natalie was just like through phone conversations, and then her just checking up, and then I got hired by her the following summer after you were in your role there, right?
Yeah.
So there's like a long history, and Natalie was like a really awesome person to have as like a support system. And I always think of like our kind of our relationship was always like, it was always just fun and joyous. Like it was never like, you kind of see when students kind of interact with their post-secondary counselor, it's very much like very stiff and very awkward, and they're trying to really paint this picture of like, I'm very proper, like here's your receipts that you requested and stuff like that. And Natalie would do site visits at the schools, and so she would come to Laurier and she'd visit, and I was always excited for it because then it was just a chance for us to like, because there were some other students there, but it was like a chance for me and her just kind of hang out again, because really enjoyed working under her at the secretariat. And I was just like, we were just like sitting there, we were talking for like an hour, like you met everyone, and me and you just kind of were sitting just like being our typical like selves, just like all like giddy and like
laughing at everything
around, like and probably like just talking to him, like like I think it was like what I really liked, it was just like being able to have like a conversation and didn't feel like you were like in charge of like the funding for me, but I don't know, it was like, it's more of like kind of like that kind of holistic way of like, I don't use that word, but like it just felt like a human to human conversation that you could connect with someone, and you could just like, it would be like a conversation you'd have like just with friends. And I remember the one student was like, do you know her? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm having a conversation with her. And they're like, yeah, but isn't she like your funding sponsor? I was like, yeah. And she's like, but you guys were laughing. I was like, yeah. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because we're having a conversation. We're laughing about it. And then she was like, what are you guys talking about? I was like, geez, like, you're just nosy. Like, I'm like, it's none of your business. But, like, I think for a lot of people, it was just, they're not used to seeing that. And I think that's what you brought to the role there, is that you brought, like, a great personality, and it's very impressionable, and you make people feel very comfortable.
Well, thank you. I try to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, like, there's like a concept of or experience of like what it can be like sometimes when you interact with people in tribal council offices or things like that. And I think for students it's really refreshing to kind of have that positive energy sometimes. And I think sometimes that all kind of that attitude you get, I think that's because of a lot of just the stress a lot of people are under, and unfortunately the things are up against, so they don't always kind of put on that happy and personable face and being able to talk to, but you really brought that to the role. And you were how was 4 years?
4 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I worked under the secretariat all like those 4 years. And then when the job came up, when I graduated, Natalie said like, hey, they're looking to someone, and I think you'd be good to like, you know, they're looking for a maternity leave at the secretariat. So I got hired there again. And then kind of, I remember it was probably in November, that was when the job went up for the role here. And Natalie was like, hey, I think you'd be really great for this job. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And it's like, well, what is it? And also she's like, it's a recruitment officer for Fanshawe College. And I was like, recruitment officer? Like, I didn't go to school to become a recruiter. Like, and I think what it is too is I just didn't know. I think that's the unfortunate thing is sometimes I think a lot of Indigenous kids, like they're going to school because they're, you know, it's that idea of like, for me, luckily I was pushed to go to school.
Yeah.
But it was also, I didn't have like parents to really know what the difference between anything was. So I just knew I was going to school. I didn't know like about jobs, like what does this role entail? What does that role entail? And then she told me like, no, it'd be like really good. Like I think you'd be really good for it. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe it was just like that post like university confidence where I was like, I don't need that kind of job. And then I was like, then my contract wasn't extended, but like I did listen to her and I did apply for it. But then, but it was like a long turnover, and Natalie was like, she was really supportive, and I think behind the scenes she really was a big push of like how I got that job. And you know, I remember it was told like by the hiring manager at the time that like, yeah, like you beat out people that had like master's levels education for this role, and it's because like people were really kind of backing you up, and so that was really cool. And then
and you've been here 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. I've been here for 5 years, and I really love Natalie. Like she's definitely like a second mother to me. And I just always remember like, oh, like I just want Natalie to work here so bad. I just want Natalie to work here so bad. And there was an opportunity at one point a couple of years ago, but it just didn't work out. It just the timing wasn't right for you, right?
Yeah.
And so then this role came up.
And you pushed me.
Yeah. And I pushed her just because I think Natalie did a lot at the secretariat. Like she did a lot, and she really made it like a strong organization in terms of like the education department. But, you know, we were growing here at the Fanshawe in terms of our Indigenous staff, and it was just like, to me, it was like a no-brainer to like, because she was such a foundational part of a lot of our initiatives because she supported them. Like our high school, like our summer college program, she would support it by funding the kids, you know, giving them living allowance while they're doing our summer college program, or just like any initiative. Like we could always depend on Natalie backing it and supporting it. And, you know, we're growing and we're going to be doing more and more cool things. And I thought like, how perfect would it be to have Natalie? And I was really excited when she applied, and then I also applied for the position because my manager wanted me to. I think he wanted me to kind of like showcase what I could do. But I remember when he announced Natalie got the job, I just said like, I've never been so happy at failing at an interview in my entire life.
Aw.
But like, it was really, I was just really excited about it because of the opportunity, and I just seen the work that Natalie's done, even as a student, and seeing how much she cares about students, and seeing like the commitment she has to students and what she's willing to do for students. I just thought it would be perfect for here for me. You know, what I see, like, for me, what is the biggest tell of like what would make a good person to fit in the team is just like, you got to have like your care for the students, like that has to be there. Like, you can have like all your education, you can have all your books behind you can have all your kind of knowledge and stuff, but like if your heart isn't there, like if your heart truly isn't in like your willingness to go over and above for the students, like I just don't think it'll ever mesh well or gel well. And because like you want these students, like, you know, students are at a disadvantage, but you want our students to feel like someone gives a crap about them, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you really bring that, because that's how I felt as a student, was like that you like really cared about us.
Yeah, and I really do care.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like there's so many, there's so much different pressure that you get when you're going to school, like pressure from your community, from your home, pressure from being funded, right? And then the academic pressure that you need to have someone in your corner.
Yeah.
And like I really do care, and I'm always so thrilled to see where people go. Like I am like so proud of where you are right now, like because I watched that journey with you, right? And I saw your struggles while you were going through that, and here you are today, right? And you're still going to school, and like that makes me really proud to know that I was a part of that journey. And so I see that with a lot of the students, you know, like they have their struggles and they get through, and some of them come over some really incredible odds of getting where they are. And to me, that's amazing. Right. And it's like, it's a huge honor for me to be a part of that journey and to watch it, even if it's just me saying like, you got this, right? Yeah. And then the ultimate is going to the graduation ceremonies. I love that.
And I remember you really struggled too when you were deciding whether to apply in that, right? Because you said like, oh, I feel like I'm leaving like these students, and I'm not like, you're like, because that's just was your commitment, right? You were so, even though you were thinking of like, you know, creating a new opportunity for yourself, you were still worried about like, what about the students, right? And to me, that speaks volumes, is that like, it's just like the selflessness about yourself. And I think that's what's needed a lot in these roles, right? I think there has to be like that idea of what I'm doing is bigger than who I am. What I'm doing is like bigger, like my role is bigger than me. Like I'm in this role and I'm fulfilling a duty, but it's to build towards something bigger. It's not to be like, oh, I'm Natalie, I'm the assistant manager, or I manage the center. Like it's not like that ego-based thing, right? And that's even kind of how I approach with recruitment. Is like it's not about me. It's like, you know, we could talk about in the news and all stuff, like, you know, we could get press coverage for all the stuff we do, but for us, like, I think that's kind of like the mentality of the center and the Institute of Indigenous Learning. I think it really comes from Guy, our director, and he's just kind of like, we're doing it because like it's what's needed and it's what the community needs. Like if we talk about like every little thing we did, like it at a certain point, like that doesn't seem that it's being for the community. That seems like it's self-fulfillment, right?
And I think that's one of the things too that really drew me here, is like how humble Guy is about everything. Like he's done amazing things here, but he doesn't want the kudos or the accolades for it, right? And he's doing it for...
He absolutely hates like attention being on him and on the spotlight.
And I relate to that because I don't like the attention either. Everything that I do, I don't want to be praised for it. Like I'm really uncomfortable with that. I just like being able to make a difference in someone's lives, or like if I can make something great happen here that even benefits one of our students, then I feel like we're making change, right? So
100%. I think of that whole I think it's like that culture where we try to create, is like that, you know, kind of what I said earlier, is like we're so much, what we're doing is so much bigger than we are. And then also it's that idea of being able to be so successful. I think there's always eyes on us, right? And that's kind of like back to that idea of like, we don't want to do stuff that seems self-promoting, is that there's always eyes, like in Indigenous communities or in First Nation communities, like there's always eyes on what you're doing, right? And even I remember when I took on that role, like this role, it's like I know there's going to be eyes on me, like how I am and like how I am in community and like how my actions are. And it made me have to be very cautious of like, okay, like there's going to be eyes on me. So like, things like going out and, going to the bars and stuff, even though I was kind of grown out of it by the time I got hired here, but like that was still part of it. It's like, there's going to be eyes on you. You can't be like in these spaces where you may run into community members, and then because you're representing the center, but you're also representing like your people at the same time.
Exactly.
And then if you're like kind of giving them a messaging of like, oh, you could do this and this, like, these are kind of like ways to like live in a good way. And then they see that you're not doing that, and it's kind of like, well, what are you talking about? You don't even talk about, you're not even practicing what you're telling us to like how to kind of live. Right. And I really value this position. And I also say like, I'm always looking for my replacement. And I think that's like a big thing too with a lot of us in these roles, is that we're always looking for the next one to like take over for us one day. Because I think it is kind of based on that value or that tradition or that like teaching of like that 7 generation thing. Like everything you're doing now affects 7 generations from now, just like everything that we've done is affected by 7 generations ago. And like I remember, I know I tell like students like that, and some like they really perk up. It's usually I tell students that are like kind of like, oh, so how'd you get this job and all this stuff. Like you can tell there's like an interest. And I said, oh, this is what I did. And I said, like, I'm always looking for my replacement. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah. And they're like, but like you don't want this job? I said, no, I like the job, I love it, but this is a young person's game. Like eventually the torch has to be passed, and it's creating that space for someone. Right, it's creating that space to allow more Indigenous perspectives, knowledge, ways of knowing in this giant institution that we operate in, right? And when I started here 5 years ago, there was 4 staff, and now we have about 10, close to 10.
Yeah, there's a lot of us in the center now, which is really nice.
And it's in multi areas. It's not just even student like services, like it's faculty. I mean, we have Anthony, that does all our videography and all our media stuff, right? Is all through Anthony, and it's taken students that have those abilities and skill sets. Like, I think that sometimes is like Indigenous people think like they have to go in like just like one field, and maybe it's the only field that they know, but it's always like their human services field. And if that's your passion, that's great. Like I can't say knock it because like I'm doing an MSW, but for me, I just want more Native kids just everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And I think what recently happened was I kind of really thought of like, if there's some students that just want to be like fully engulfed in traditional stuff, then that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And if there's some kids that don't want it to be engulfed in traditional way, they want to be more modern, that's awesome too. And if there's kids that want to have a mixture of both, then that's awesome too. I think sometimes we get so caught up in like, no, like you have to be in this way in order to be, be a true Native. Or it's like, no, well, I don't want to do that because it's just like, we should just be accepting. And I think that really kind of goes back. And I kind of had this thought recently of like, there was a counselor that said something about like, well, what about we do this kind of workshop with students and they have these kind of career cards, and they say, well, what about students that have like want to just like use traditional knowledge and make a career out of that? And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like and for me, it's like, I should be cool with that too, right? Because if that's the thing, but I just want it to be more collective, that everyone is coming. Like, if you have the big thing to me is like, you have to choose something though, right?
Yeah.
Right? Because but if you're just not choosing to be in the game at all, then it's really not going to help you or your family move forward, right?
Yeah.
And if there's like, like we need our language speakers and all that and stuff, but like our language speakers need to respect the people that don't want to do language. And that should be okay, right? Like, if I can't commit to learning the language at this time, like, I shouldn't be less than because of that. Just like I also shouldn't think less than of them if that's what they choose to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think it's taken time and it's also me working through all my kind of BS in my head, and kind of like, we're all products of like our environment, right?
Yeah.
And growing up, like my background is just like a really confusing background, like being Oneida and Blackfoot, but growing up in an Anishinaabe like community. It's just like, for me, it's just really, it's gave me knowledge, but it also it really kind of messed me up in like my
Yeah.
viewpoints and stuff too.
And see, all your experience will change and shape you and put you on the path you're supposed to be on, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would not have thought when I was coming to Fanshawe doing my program, which was developmental services worker, that I would ever be here today in this role.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just not something I ever would have considered. But the opportunity came up for me to get my undergrad in community in Oneida to do my teaching degree. And when I went and did that, that's when I started to learn about who I was as an Indigenous person, because like, I didn't grow up with any of that. Like,
Yeah.
my mom is First Nations, my dad's from Europe, so
Dutch boy.
Dutch boy. I mean, yeah, I'm a good Dutch girl.
Yeah. And you should be proud to say that. And I think
And I
sometimes
totally am.
I think sometimes we get so weary. Like, you know, there's just the reality of like who we are. Like, we have like European background, right? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes like it's almost like if you're white presenting, you're so afraid to like, oh, I'm just like I'm Caldwell, and then but you're like, and what else? You know, like, and I think for me, like, that's always kind of my big thing, and maybe it's something I need to be more conscious of. But like, to me, it's like, I know like my kids are gonna not be like full native, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want them to be proud of like that other side, right? But I think that is maybe remnants of colonization, that it makes it so difficult. Like, there's almost like a fear to talk about that side,
Yeah.
because if you're talking about that side, it's almost like, am I acknowledging the privilege I had? You know?
And that's where I think a lot of people have trouble, like, reconciling those two parts of them,
Yeah.
right? And but one of the teachings that I learned from an elder is, like, you honor your ancestors.
Yeah.
And it was those, like, simple words that really made me think about that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, absolutely. Like, I wouldn't be here if my dad didn't come from
Yep.
the Netherlands and meet my mom. And they've been together for like 48 years.
Yeah.
So, like, I've learned a lot from the two of them,
Yep.
just in their interactions with each other. And, you know, and the culture I get from my mom, and then the teachings I get from my dad from his
Yep.
past too. Like, that just has made me who I am today, and I think has helped form me into the person that I am. Right.
I think sometimes we're unfortunately, whether by ourselves that we've done it or for whatever reason, like it just seems like Indigenous is like, we're very like trauma based with our things.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore by acknowledging that there is like not full Native ancestry, you're acknowledging that there's privilege, and it's almost like, oh, I don't fit in with the trauma of the Indigenous plight, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like, oh, I got to fit in, so I guess, but yeah, I'm just like this, right? Yeah, and all. But for me, it's like, no, you should be happy that you're in a position because you had a father that was able to, have a little. Yeah, maybe there was a little bit of privilege there, right? But he probably also had to work hard, right?
Yeah.
But there was also like privilege in terms of like all that kind of stuff, and I think it's wrong for us to poo-poo like if people were able to do that. But also, like, you're looking at your role now, right? It's your way of trying to create pathways for maybe on reserve, full Native, or whatever you want to call it, to have their pathway to success, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I understand that everyone's on a different journey of discovering who they are, or at the like where how they identify, right? So, I mean, it doesn't make your job easy, right? Because there's not just one fit for everyone, or one situation that like you can relate, like everyone can relate to it. So, and I think that's part of what I really like about this job too, is like being able to work with the students. And that was one of my big things, is I didn't want to not be able to work with students. I just didn't want to be all admin and sitting behind a desk and doing paperwork. I love being able to work with the students, like sit there and just chat with them or talk to them. That's the best part of this job, right? And if I had to give that up, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
100%. Like, I think that's kind of goes back into that idea of like community-based interaction, and it's just, you want to feel connected. Like, and I think, I don't know if this is like a lesson for like other departments at the institution, like here at Fanshawe or even any other institution. I think when your work environment is located away from the students, you lose track, or you become jaded of like why you're there. Mm-hmm. Right? It's really hard. It would be really hard pressed to make a decision if it's going to screw over students.
Yeah.
because we interact with them so much.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's something to it. I think even like how even Guy, right? We've had a new renovation in the center, but he still chose to like he could have gone up where all the senior admin go, but he wanted to stay in the center because to him it's like that idea of if you're amongst the students, like it's a reminder of what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear them, like even if you're sitting at your desk, unless you're doing work, you hear them talking about things, and you'll get up and you'll go join that conversation or say, hey, how can I help you with that? Like, what can we do to make that happen? So, and I'm big on student voice. Like I really love being able to listen to what the students want and then doing something about it. And having them lead those kind of activities, because I think that helps build like confidence, but also leadership, right?
Yeah. And that's 100% true. Natalie is a big promoter because that's all what she used to push for me when even I was a student, right? She always like, she kind of pushed me to always ensure that I had my voice and like supported me, right? And I think, I think she even supported me even when my voice was probably not very fully developed in terms of my ways of knowing, but it's still like you gotta learn, right? We just learn from our mistakes sometimes too, right? And that's what I think sometimes it's taken me a long time, and I kind of go back and just think of things I've done, and it's like, oh, like that's like I can learn from it, right? And for me, that's why I like to get students involved so much with a lot of the stuff that we do, because who knows, maybe our next recruiter is one of our students currently, right? Or maybe one that graduated just not too long ago. But like, I want them involved to see what it's like, to see behind the scenes as much as possible. And that, I think sometimes sometimes you can be the face, and like sometimes like that's like kind of the role I feel like sometimes I get, because I'm so much in community, like I'm kind of the face of what we're doing. And I think to them, they're like, oh, it must be like pretty easy, you just do this. It's like, yeah, there's like a lot of stuff that goes behind the scenes, and there's like a lot of frustrations and a lot of like stresses, and like I think not like saying I don't like it, but like this is like a job when you're in this role, is like it's really hard to turn it off,
Yeah.
You bring a lot of stuff with you home, and I think that's what like non-Indigenous world doesn't understand, is like when you're doing a job, it's not just like you clock in, you clock out, that's it. Like you carry of it so much home with you. Because from our like our knowledge keepers, like Liz, she's always talking about like it's like that spiritual connection you have to these students, and it's like if things not going right for them, like you carry that with you, because it's like it's almost like a reflection of yourself. Like you see yourselves in them so much, and I don't know if it's like counter transference or whatever, like that kind of whatever academic word you want to use, but to me it's like yeah, like counter transference exists, but like also it's like a reminder of like why I'm doing stuff and why I need to do it, right? And that's for me, it's like part of my big thing right now in my like program, my MSW, is like there's a lot of stuff I'm learning. I'm just like, oh, like I can't align with it. Like I just don't. I get the reason behind it, but I also think in my world it's not gonna play out how they want me to play it out.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, just turn it off. And it's like, you can't turn it off sometimes,
No. And you can't, because I think part of the job too is like you have to defend every decision you make and justify everything that you want, right? So it seems like we have a lot of battles. Like we're always fighting, or maybe not fighting is the right word, but we're always having to say like, this is why we want it to happen. These are the reasons why. And it's like every day you're having those conversations to make things happen, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've learned is that you also have to pick your battles. Like some of them you're just going to have to let go, and others you fight. And if you don't let them go, then that just brings you down, right?
Yeah,
and
it's kind of like that idea of like this is a system. We are operating in a system right now. Do I wish it was more of a system inept to like our way of doing? Like, yeah. But I also don't think it's there at that point yet. But I also will tell students, like, if the system's not made for you, don't also just like quit, I guess, right? Quit the journey, because we need people to infiltrate systems and organizations to really bring our perspective. And I think that's what we have been able to do here at the college, is like seeing, like doing it, getting them to do it our way, but then also seeing the success of doing it our way.
Yeah.
Like there's things like even with like the summer college program, like I think they're going to start thinking about implementing it for mainstream students because it makes sense. Like
it does.
Why not have students come earlier to start courses that are often difficult courses or courses that they're like, oh, like I don't want to do it, and get it out of the way and get a jump start on the year. Like that to me, like that's just like it's like common sense stuff, right? And I think sometimes like a lot of the Indigenous stuff that we do or even teachings, I'm like, oh, it's just like so common sense, but it's common sense to us, but it's not common sense to maybe a world that didn't grow up with those kind of ways of thinking or doing, right?
But I think that Fanshawe is a really good institution for making those things happen. Like they're really open and like they listen, which again is one of the reasons why I wanted to come here, because you're seeing that actual change happen, right?
Yeah, and I think for you get that perspective of visiting other places, right?
Yeah.
And how hard it is for them to get changed to even go.
Yeah, because you really need the right people in place to make that change happen. Yeah. And I think it's just because it's a system that's sort of built on all these Western views that have continued for many
rituals
years,
and structures, and
right, and
the bureaucracy.
Yeah, and you just need to shake that up a little bit, and I feel like that needs to happen everywhere. Like the education system needs to be shooken up a little bit, and let's change.
I've had arguments when I sat at like tables where there was decision makers, but not here. I'm talking about like a governor and like Indigenous body or kind of like that. It was like a board, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember they were talking about like, well, we need to implement this into the we should talk to the ministry that they need to implement this in the funding model, and that like they need to make sure it's like if you don't hit this and do this requirement, then you won't receive funding in your institution. Like the ministry needs to. And I said, why though? Like why do that? Like why implement? Like I understand like saying the ministry to do something. I said, but that's like the stuff that happens in the school, that falls on the people that are running these departments. Mm-hmm. Like I think for me, it's like if things are done, like I always think of like things needing to be done in a good way. And if you're doing like a thing to say like you ministry guidelines say do this, therefore you have to do it. Like, yeah, they're going to do it, but it's not going to be in a way that like they want to do it.
Yeah.
Like it's like, yeah, they're going to begrudgingly do it. They're going to do like, I guess it's checking off a box, right? Yeah. And real change, which is what I think that we've been able to do here with our team, is like doing things because we know it needs to be done, but also showing like it's a game. Like, hey, like the college looks good for doing this, but our students are benefiting from it, right? It's so much different than what you said. If you're being forced to do it, is the effort going to be there? Is there going to have the back and like, oh, we just got to check this box? Like, and I think that's the problem. That is the problem with like the education system as a whole. Is it's solely run on checking off boxes, you know, and you know, I think maybe that's like a message to these institutions and all these Indigenous departments is like you have the power to create the change in your institution. Like, give your institution wins. Like, give them the wins. Like, it's like if you're running a program and it's failing, well, no, yeah, that's like it's like business 101. You're not going to keep doing a thing that keeps failing.
Yeah.
Give them a program that's going to do wins. Show them like our ways of doing things and our ways of knowing and how we can do it can be successful.
Like, I think a big win is a summer college for sure that we ran, but also that high school day we had last week. Yeah. There was like how many high school students? 300. Yeah, there was like Indigenous high school students.
Like close to 300. Like these are all senior students too. We're not talking like grade 9 to 12. We're talking about grade 12s and 11s.
So there's a potential for like 300 new students to come here next year, right?
Yeah, and I think it's give them that idea of like that perspective of you know, part of like how we do our high school day, which some of the people that are going to be listening like may have been a part of, but it's like it's why we do the way we do it is like we want students to feel like they're wanted, right? So we'll do the steps of like, yeah, we're going to put on this like big event. It's going to cost money, all this stuff, but like that stuff they don't see, right? But what they do see is like the connections that you can make with them, right? Mm-hmm. And we bring in different guest speakers to share Indigenous people, not people that are like that work on the talking head like panels and all that stuff,
Yeah.
Like we're talking about people that are just in roles, like they've utilized education as a way to get into a role, and they're creating change by being just we had two young women that work in the banks, right, and they're creating ripple effects in the banking system by having Indigenous perspective there. You have another one of our guest speakers. She was she works at Hydro One in the communication. She's creating ripple effects of like how to think about Indigenous stuff, right? You have another one who was here at Fanshawe, and he has an accountant background, and he works closely with us, and it's all like ways of using him as a tool to figure out how do we create more change. And he's going to have this really cool campaign that he's going to start I don't know if I'm able to talk about, but like he's going to start this campaign of like creating a way to muster up more donations to support our initiatives, because they see that I think maybe it's also because we've given so much wins that like senior level people are like, yeah, like you should do this, like we should figure out ways to get more financial support for these programs because it's being effective, right?
Yeah. And that high school program, last year I came and I brought my daughter who was in grade 12 at the time.
2 years ago. It was 2 years, 2 summers ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she made a connection with one of the speakers and started taking part in like
that was last year. I'm sorry, I think it was Trent.
Yeah. And started taking part in the programming, and it's like saved her life. It totally changed her life. So even like that's a win, right?
Yeah.
Because it's set her on the right path. She's going to college now.
Yeah.
Not here, but she'll come
cool,
here
though.
one day.
But it's that idea of like when we bring in guest speakers, because I think for sometimes they're maybe not ever chosen to, because I think sometimes like there is an overemphasis to focus on like the long shot stories.
Yeah,
and that's what we
changers.
Yeah, like that's big names. The celebritydom. That's what we get obsessed with, and that's what we like to promote. But those are great stories, and that's great opportunities for those, and that they are able to have that stuff. But those are also like, it's kind of like life lottery stuff too, right? They like, oh, you made a break as an actor or whatever, like that's
you got lucky. Yeah, that's
like thing. It's hard work, but like also like you got a little bit of luck behind that too,
Yeah.
And I just want real people talking to like students so it feels like a real thing. And then that's the great thing of like how we kind of conducted it is that they'll do a guest speaker, and we kind of do it in like a talk show style way with Dave Jones from Turtle Concepts, and he brings really great energy and real positivity, and he just keeps it up and keeps that energy up. But he does it in a way like it doesn't have them standing at a podium speaking to like a pulpit. You know what I mean? Like it very much like okay, like it does it in a fun, interactive way, and it makes it. I think it humanizes people, because sometimes I think when you get on stage, like it's like, oh, like they're on stage, they must be very important, and they are important, but it's like it's like, oh, like that's not like I can never be like that. And it's like you can, like these are just people just living their lives, doing what they need to do to make a living.
Yeah, and he pulls you on stage, and he makes you comfortable.
Yeah,
and you do things that maybe like are totally appropriate but fun.
Yeah,
right. Like
100%.
Dave's a lot of fun,
and I think that just connects. Like I maybe that's what I'll go back and talk to all the Indigenous leads and see what worked and what doesn't work. But this thing has evolved. It's evolved from 3 or 4 years ago when we started doing it, and even like there's moments when I'm doing it, like because Brian, who's also works at the center, he's our career consultant. He really helped out this year with he basically helped plan it. Like he might even did more of the planning stuff than I did, because with my role and just being on placement, but he did an amazing job. But it's just, even having it done so many times, you kind of get all the kinks worked out where it's almost like it's smoother running now. Yeah. And that's really, I mean, it's still stressful. Like I still don't sleep the night before. Like I really don't. Like I see the clock every time it turns like the next hour.
Yeah.
But I think that's always like, I think that's kind of like that Christmas morning stuff too. That's like that excitement.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy and excited of that event. And
it was a great event. It was great.
And I think of for me, I think the idea is that yeah, I work for Fanshawe, and I don't know if I should be saying this on the pod, but like my bosses are not like necessarily you and Guy or like whoever. Like my bosses are those people in those communities, right? Like they're the ones, like, again, like you're so connected to the students, is that like you're really aware of, like, if it wasn't for them, there's no purpose of me being in this role, right?
Yeah, and the communities actually entrust you with the well-being of their students, and it's one of those things that I think a lot of people don't understand. Like, the community is relying on you to take care of these students. Because
the reality is, like, the education system isn't a walk in a park for us historically, right? It's not a, and, you know, we're not going to get into it, but like, we got to acknowledge it wasn't always a good thing, but like, we're trying to really create a positive way for students to be successful, right? And I think going forward, that's always going to be kind of the messaging, is always like doing things to make it better. Like, we need more space. We need more space for Indigenous students, but we also need the students, when they're in this space, to really make that conscious effort of like, hey, like, you got to do this, right? You're here now. Like, you gotta really kind of, and if there's hiccups or things on the road, or there's things that aren't helping you be successful, come see us like right away, so we can figure out how to ensure to get you back on track to be successful, right? And I think just being supportive of each other, and just
like, overall, we have a really good team. Like, our team works really well together. And we have a really great bunch of students that are in the center. Like, so they make it fun, right?
Yeah.
So
100%. I think it's like really cool. Like, yeah, it just you want it to be like, it doesn't feel like you're going into work all the time, right? And I think we do a good job, and I think the students really do a good job of creating that space to like feel like you can interact, you can have fun, you can focus. Like, you're there for a reason.
And they're also very accepting of each other, which I love. Like one of the students had been away for a little while, and she came back in. Another student noticed right away, like, "Oh, you just came back. We missed you." And like a hug. And I'm like, "Oh, that's so sweet." Like, because part of being away from home is missing that connection, right, to family or community, and it's created right there in the center, which is so nice, right? And if a student's not feeling their best, you can tell, and they can tell if you're not feeling your best too. So it's really nice, the environment in there that is created, and if we're struggling, we struggle with the students, and they struggle with us. So it's neat. It's really neat. I love the role I'm in right now. I love it.
Well, we're really happy that you're part of the centers team now, and I know I'm really happy, and like it's made me really happy that they're there, and just, you know, you see the effort, right? There's I think students see it too. Like, the willingness you have to, like, something has to be done, you just do it, or, you know, you're in there making breakfast, you're doing all those kind of things, right? These things when you're in like a manager role, people wouldn't assume that you do, right? Or it's not expected you do, but it's that heart is there, that you want it there to be there and to help them, and you're willing to do it. And to me, that speaks volumes of like your, you know, if people question that indigeneity or whatever, like, it's like, no, like, watch their actions, right? And for me, it's like, it's real action based. It's like, watch their actions and how people are. And I think for that is like, it really speaks volumes.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good amount, I think, for today, to get a little bit intro. And I think we'll always kind of
wanted to comment on your shirt.
Yeah. All right. Shout out to my boy Chris over at Dirt Label in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Biggie Smalls Bear.
Biggie Smalls Bear. Shout out Chris. Like, I hope you send me some free stuff. But other than that, like, I think we'll do this again. I think this was a really good. I just love having a conversation with you. It feels so natural and just easy going.
It does, hey?
And and I'm just really excited that you're part of our team here at the
Thank you.
Institute of Indigenous Learning First Nation Center.
Honored to be here.
All right. Awesome. Take care, guys.
Later.